Great, it's recording. Well, welcome to Rooted. We're on our second podcast, and today I'm really excited to be here with Mary, who is a very special friend. And so Mary, say hi.
Hi. It's
Who
so
are
good
you?
to be on here. We were just saying how it's been literally a year since we last saw each other at New Wine.
So it's very nice
Always
to catch up.
Yeah, it's good. And it's so I'm so excited about this. It's going to be really fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say. So before we start, I thought the biggest question I should ask you is, what is your favourite chocolate bar?
Oh my gosh, literally a 12. It's actually really funny because I ate 2 of them yesterday. My dad brought me back a multi-pack of mini ones, and there was 4, and in 2 days I've eaten them all, so
Wow.
Self-control.
I like cookies. 12 aren't my favourite. I'm not a fan of them, really.
I do love a crunchy, but I feel like that's something I'll eat every now and again. I fancy a crunchy. But I think 12 bites are just, if I'm going to the corner shop and I want chocolate, 12 bites.
No. Well, that's cool. Well, Mary is on here to share some personal stories, to give us some wisdom. So Mary, I would love to hear your story of faith and how you came to faith, and bits of your journey of faith, if you had to share that.
Yeah, that's fine. So I originally was brought up going to Catholic church. So I went to Catholic church, I was probably about 13, really on and off though, it was really on and off. And my dad was brought up going to Catholic church. I think it was because of that. We did our first Holy Communion, we did our confirmation. So that was my really early church experience. And I think I've always said I don't think I've ever not believed in God. But I never knew Jesus. I never knew I knew obviously he's in the Bible. I knew who Jesus was, but I didn't know him. I didn't know that I could have a relationship with him. I didn't know any of that. And then I grew up in Cornwall. And I also went to this kind of really random little youth group, which was a Church of England thing. So it's kind of all a bit sporadic.
Oh, no.
And it was run by this couple called Jackie and Doug, who are my adopted grandparents. I love them so much, and they actually came to my baptism, which was really nice.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was my early church experience. And I think when I moved from Cornwall at 16, it was a really big life change for me. I just finished my GCSEs. I was moving from somewhere that I'd lived for 13 years of my life. And I'd sort of found my group of friends in year 11, when you're just kind of finding out roughly who you are a little bit more. And I was I found my group of friends, and I was just so gutted that I was moving. So we moved up to Cheltenham, and we were at my sixth form, and there was a Youth for Christ stand, and my mum's not a Christian, but she knew obviously with random bits of church. She was oh, you should go to this youth club, it'd be good for you, you can make friends. I was yeah, okay, why not? So I ended up going, and it turned out the guy who ran it, he lived down the road from us and went to the church around the corner from us, which was much more of a charismatic evangelical church, which my mum had never been to and I'd never been to. And so I went, and I kind of went really sporadically. I went for the youth group just to make friends. Sixth form was really hard, struggled to settle in, and I think I just wanted to belong somewhere, and I didn't feel I did. So yeah, I think I had my first taste of what a relationship with Jesus would be is at this church, and I was I never said yes. I never put my hand up to say yes to Jesus. I went to all the little Sunday things, but again it was I felt I shouldn't be there. I could not shake this feeling of being I'm not supposed to be here, this is so wrong. And I think that's what ended up with me stopping, because I just felt such deep shame, and I was I shouldn't be here. I'm not. Compared myself to all the girls in the youth group, and was they've all been brought up Christian, and my parents aren't the same as them, and so I was not feeling like I fitted in at school, and then I didn't feel like I fitted in at church, and then so I just stopped going. And then we all sort of turned 18 and drinking came onto the cards and going out, and I actually didn't do as well in my A levels as I thought I would, so that all changed. And I ended up going to clearing, and I went to uni in Swansea. So I ended up in Swansea and I studied social policy, and that was in 2014. So I'm an old girl. It feels like ages ago. So yeah, like I give all this background because there is a bit of a context which I'll try and talk about a bit later. But yeah, so originally applied for Newcastle. So there's a ton of events there as well, which is quite funny too. Yeah, I know, because I'm currently living in Newcastle now. So it's really random, but it's God, but there we go. And yeah, so I ended up in Swansea. I was studying social policy. I was really happy. I was by the beach again. I'd waved goodbye to any kind of church. Like I decided it hadn't impacted me enough for me to be bothered by it. And it was just, you know, I met a couple of nice people I kept in touch with sporadically. But I just sort of threw myself in. I joined snow sports. Like, that's a big thing for me. And you know, just got involved in the drinking culture, everything in between. And it was in the December of 2014 that I got really depressed, and I was hating my course. Everything was terrible, but I didn't want to let my parents down. So I was like, I'd not handed in my assignments. I'd walked out of an exam after 30 minutes, you know, and they're like, after 30 minutes you can leave. I was like, I'm out of here. Like, and my housemates were just like, Meza, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. And then push came to shove, I ended up dropping out. And then I'll sort of fast forward through this bit, but I did quite a lot of things. So I dropped out of uni and then landed myself working in a chalet in a ski resort like a week and a half later. So I just kind of flitted around for a really long time. I came back from that and I nannied in London for like 3 months, and twice in London I went to church.
Oh, that's cool.
But again, I like, because there was just one around the corner, and I thought, oh, like I might meet nice friendly people there, and I went. But again, it was just like, I shouldn't be here. Like, what am I doing here? Like, this is just silly. So then I stopped going, and also they were all a lot older than me, so I was a bit like, I don't really fit in. And then I moved back home to Cheltenham and kind of was like, I need to sort my life out a little bit. You know, I was 19, I felt so far behind everyone already. You know, I was like, I'm already on a back foot, I've got no money, I can't go and do all the fun things like traveling like you would on a gap year. So I already felt disappointed. And it felt like my own fault. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, it felt like this is my own doing. Like, if I hadn't have dropped out, none of this would have happened. So it's like no one else's fault but my fault. And then I was going out a lot, and then I started an apprenticeship, quit that because I didn't like it, and then I eventually got a job with the NHS, and I loved that. And I'd met a guy online, so I was starting dating him and had my first proper boyfriend. So I was all caught up with that, and just kind of coasted a little bit for a year or so. Like, life wasn't terrible; it was sort of okay. I think looking back, nothing dramatic happened, but I think in myself as a person, I just never felt enough. I was struggling with like my body image. I developed a really bad eating disorder. I was like constantly feeling depressed because of dropping out of uni, and like I just didn't feel like I was going anywhere with my life. And I was like, 16-year-old me was like looking at 21-year-old me going, like, you're not where you said you would be. Like, you've not done any of the things that you said you would do. Like, you've not worked a ski season. You've not gone traveling to Bali like all your friends have gone from Cornwall. And, you know, you've left uni with a load of debt, and you've made some terrible financial choices, and you're dealing with that. And your mum and dad are just really disappointed in you. And I think I was so internally like, but I would just block it away, and I wouldn't let myself admit that. And I just used sort of the masquerade of being in a nice relationship to sort of convinced myself I was happy when actually I was really depressed for a really long time. And you know, my relationship was long distance. That went on for sort of 2.5 years, and then things really started to go downhill for me. And we ended up breaking up. I'd gone back to college sort of within this time to start an access course. I'd loved working for the NHS. I wanted to do my nursing. So in that sense, I kind of felt like I was, you know, finding my feet a bit more. So I'd started going back to college to do an access course and was doing that and was really enjoying it. And I think some part of me had sort of thought, oh, I'm enjoying this. I'm doing this for myself. Like, I'd applied to unis where my now ex-boyfriend lived. And then we broke up and I was just like, that's really crap. You know, it's not great. It was really hard, but I think it was meant to be. So I didn't, you know, I sort of let it happen in a way. And then came the spiral of me realizing how much pent up trauma and issues I'd gained over the years and not dealt with just came out in me going out drinking like 3-4 times a week. Like, I look back on myself on that time and it was literally only like probably end of January 2018 to like, well, maybe like March, just before like I walked into church, and I was like out so much that I don't know how I did my coursework. I don't know how I was still working as well. Like, this is the crazy part, was like I was still full-time, like semi full-time, you know, working in a care job. And I remember turning up like hungover and it was awful. And I don't think you realize the weight of an issue that you had until like you look back on yourself and you're like, what? Like, you know, and you realize how far you've come. But I went out on a night out with my friend Kate, and we'd go out on like the student nights because they were cheaper. And I was 21 at this time. Yeah, so I wasn't like a spring chicken, so to speak, you know. Like, I knew what I was doing and I was dealing with my issues in that way. And, you know, seeking affirmation in all the wrong places and everything else. Like, and I think the more I realized I was just not dealing with my issues, the more I became more depressed. And then we went out one Wednesday and I got so drunk that I barely remember the night, but I fell down a flight of stairs. I got rejected into the nightclub, so I didn't even make it in. And that's like a local nightclub that I've been going to since I was like 18, so that's still a bit embarrassing really, but you gotta laugh about it. And then I got put in a taxi home and I vomited everywhere and I got kicked out of the taxi. And then I was sat on the side of the road just like really poorly, obviously. And then I got a lift home from my random friends who I didn't know. So it was all a bit of a dodgy situation, really. I'd put myself in a bit of a vulnerable place there. And then I got back to her house. I don't remember any of this. This is all from sort of stuff I've been told and little flashbacks. But even to this day, I'm like, why did I do that? But I think it was the catalyst that really got me, like, to sort of take a long, hard look at myself, basically. That's how I describe it. And, you know, that whole night I was sick all over her mum's carpet. It was just, like, terrible. And then the next day, she was laughing at it all and thought it was really funny. She was like, oh, you were such a mess last night. It was so funny. Like, I've never seen you in that state. Like, I know you can drink, Meza, but, like, that was just next level. Like, look at these videos. And she just showed me all these Snapchats. And I was like, what, who? It, like, I knew that wasn't the me that I knew, if that makes sense. It was like I'd morphed into this person in such a short space of time that I didn't know who I was anymore. And I left and I was like, I just spent the next sort of 2 days like moping around. I was really poorly. I was essentially giving myself like a kidney infection, like, because I'd been drinking that much. It was really bad. And yeah, I was in my living room and I was like watching films, moping, Netflix, binging, feeling sorry for myself, having a good cry, takeaway chocolate, you name it, trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself, like knowing I needed to sort myself out. Plus a lot of like arguments with my parents in between that, because, you know, they were worried about me. And I think I realise now, like looking at my self-destructive behaviour, like no wonder they were so angry at me all the time. Like I was like, makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And they were worried. And that Saturday I was like finding a film to cry to, as you do, and I ended up watching the film The Shack, and I didn't know it was about God. I didn't know it was a sort of Christian film.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like that's where I was like, I'm going to be a Christian. But I knew it was significant. Like looking back, there was a reason I was just like bawling my eyes out. And
Yeah.
something in me was like, God, like if you're actually there and stuff that they're describing on this film or I'm feeling is true, then like I need help. Like I need an intervention in my life that is going to stop me self-destructing, because I just was. And I honestly think sometimes I'm like, if I had carried on the way I was going, like I just don't know what I would have done. Like I think I just, that cycle that I was in was so toxic. And then it was quite ironic, but I say ironic, but it was sort of God's positioning, I guess. A girl I met from the church that I went to when I was 16 in Cheltenham, Emma, she was doing a lot of youth work at the church, and she was sort of similar age to me as well. And we were meeting up, we had just stayed friends, and we were meeting up for brunch the next day to have a catch up. And I was kind of like, oh, like I can tell Emma that I've sort of Googled a church and I've watched this film and my life's kind of falling apart, even though she doesn't know me that well. But I think I need to just tell her that I want to go to church.
Wow.
So I did, and then we went that evening and I was at the talk and I just bawled my eyes out, met with the Holy Spirit and was like, put my hand up for Jesus. And, you know, I say it like lightheartedly, but I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I just knew whatever this was, it was going to be better than where I was going originally. And I think, so that's like sort of how I came to like hear the gospel and like really make that decision. And I did Alpha and then got baptized and then came to New Wine, which is where I met you, which is quite funny. Another turn of events. So yeah, like I think that summer was, and looking back on that time sort of at the end of March to like going to New Wine, I was just in a period of like, I had to, you know, I stopped being friends with that girl for a while and I had to just totally separate myself. And I realised like I really didn't have many friends in Cheltenham, and sort of threw myself into church. And my parents were like, what the heck is she doing? Like 1 minute she's going out 3 times a week, now she's blooming going to church on a Sunday. And they were just so confused. Like it was, they just didn't really understand. I think they don't still in some ways, but I think it's a lot better now. So when I went to New Wine, I was like, I'd signed up to do stewarding, and that was quite funny because I was like, yeah, I'll just be a steward because I can't really do anything else. Like, yeah, I was like, I'm not going to do anything else, even though part of me was like, I'd love to do kids work or youth work or something. I didn't feel like I knew enough about the Bible or God to be able to like help young people.
And I remember you telling me that as well, because you were sat opposite me, because I was on staff there, and Mary was saying, you know, I don't feel qualified to do this, and I don't think I'm able to do that. And like it was really just heartbreaking to hear that from you.
Yeah, I mean, it was so like overwhelming because I was so excited. Like honestly, like 2 days before I'd actually committed to going, because I've been tiptoeing around it for like a good 2 weeks, and I was like, no, I've got the time off, I can go. And like sort of things fell into place that I was managed to get a lift from someone at my church and everything. So I knew I was supposed to be there, but I was just like, this makes no sense. Like, why am I here? Like, I'm not like a worship leader. I'm not a this, I'm not a that. And like, what am I doing? Like, I've only just been baptized. Like, I'm so new to this. And then I obviously like, I think it hit me when I was walking down to go and get my team band. I was like, I really don't want to do stewarding. Also, my phone is just broken, so I'm slightly over emotional because I can't contact anyone. So even though, so when I got to you, it all just kind of, I sat there, I was like, I don't know why I'm here. It was like bawled my eyes out to you, like. And then you know, I was saying, I don't think I'm supposed to do stewarding, and if there's a space on kids work, then I'd really like to do kids work. And then you were like, well, I think there's Boulder Gangs free, and I was like, I'm just a big extrovert.
Yeah.
It was funny. So yeah, I think looking back on it, I remember I was saying to you earlier, like just before we started and recorded this, that that was all shame. And I think if I'm thinking about where God's taken me, and like since that sort of year where I became a Christian, it's only been 2 years now, but I think it's been this really deep, intense period of like addressing the shame in my life and realizing that I've lived in a place of shame for so long, even after becoming a Christian and knowing like Jesus can free me from shame. Like he died for me on the cross and he took all of that sin and that shame with him. It was almost like a comfort blanket for me. Like if I stayed in my shame blanket, I was safe, and if I took it off, I was vulnerable, and I was like, I don't know who this person is. And I think when you look at trying to be content in your life, for me, looking at that moment, I was turned up to New Wine in a complete shame basement, and I was saying about this book that I've been reading, and it's called The Power of Belonging, and the guy talks about this shame basement, and he basically, in his church, was this room that was just disgusting, and it smelled, and no one could figure out like where the smell was coming from. But what they didn't realize was actually under the foundations of the church was like sewage water, it was minging. And this is where for him, like he realized like it's like a sort of similar to like a shame basement, and like we all put stuff in there, or we go through stuff, we make mistakes, we make stupid decisions, and we don't want anyone to know about those things, so they stay in the basement hidden away from everyone's sight, and they just fester and they start to smell, and we oust it. And I was thinking about it this morning, like we use the oust spray to like get rid of bad smells, and you know, we do that in our life. Like we could be coasting along even as a Christian, like going to church, serving in ministry, on the worship team, like, but actually like knowing we have so much shame within us that if anyone actually knew, like they wouldn't accept us. And that was me. Like that's been sort of a really huge part of, a significant part of my journey with God. And like I think when like that whole week, you know, after I ended up in Boulder Gang and was like loving life for the week, that was just the first step in so many over 2 years of just like, when you think about trying to be content, I know you were saying like wanted to chat about sort of finding contentment, like it starts with letting go of your shame, or like dealing with your shame, like until you deal with things you're shameful about and those events or decisions or whatever it is that is causing that, until you go into the shame basement, I don't think it's fully possible to really start to feel content with where you're then at. Because I don't know if I'm waffling now, but
no, it's good stuff. This is good.
I think that like I am content now. I'm not fully content, but I think I've learned that being content is a choice, and actually like the enemy wants us to live in discontent, because actually being content in God is like knowing his goodness in our life and his faithfulness in our life and trusting in that. And I think that is then when you're living in a place of contentment. Even if I think I always thought it was like when everything's perfect, I'll be content, you know, like I was like, I'll be content when I've met the nice Christian guy and like, and I'm married and I have kids, and or I'll be content when I'm on the worship team, and then I'll be content when I'm this. And actually no, like I think probably the biggest thing of lockdown, and I mean this year has been crazy for everyone, like has been like contentment is literally choosing to believe in God's goodness and faithfulness and living in that space and being grateful for what you have, even though it's not perfect and it's still messy and it's still hard and you're still dealing with your shame and you're still dealing with your guilt or whatever it is that God is trying to help you through. You know, I think that's where you truly start to feel content. And I think also within that is like comparison as well. Like if you really become intentional about letting go of comparing yourself to other people, and I say intentional not to be like every day you must not compare yourself,
Yeah.
but like when those thoughts come in, like the Bible says, take every thought captive. Like when you find yourself comparing yourself to someone, it's acknowledging that thought and going, okay, like why? And even if you haven't, or even if you've been comparing yourself all day or for weeks and you've not realized it, or you've just decided that you're in a bit, you don't want to, um taking yourself back to that place where you're like, why am I comparing myself to the season or time that person's in, or that stage of their life where that person's at, or what they look like, or you know what they've got for Christmas place, and going, okay, really simple things that I'm grateful for, or you know, like what do I find the most joy in my life at the moment. I think that's what I'm trying to do. Like it's not this big grand, I spend 20 minutes a day writing down everything I'm grateful for and then I'm content. I think it's a choice that you wake up on the wrong side of the bed one morning and it might take you 2 hours, but then you suddenly feel this sense of peace, and I'm like, that's the contentment in my life. And it's like, you know, like yesterday I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I had an argument with my dad, I then cycled to work, but it was on the cycle to work when it was sunny, and I was like just taking a deep breath, and I was like, oh, I'm still content. Like, yeah, I had a bit of a wobbly morning and I fell out with my dad, and he'd woken up on the wrong side of the bed and we both clashed, and it was too early and I hadn't cycled to work at 9 a.m. in a really long time. But I found the contentment when I cycled around the corner and saw the sea, and it was the light on the water was just amazing. And I think it's those kinds of things where you can find contentment. And I think the further you look away from God and you take your eyes off him, like that's when discontent just creeps in straight away. And it's, you know, being disciplined and like spending time with your Bible and with God is so important, but I think it is a choice you can just make out and about, like on your day to day. Like it doesn't have to be this over spiritualized thing. But obviously it's so important. You know, how I managed my mental health is like through discipline, trying to be in the word, and like that's a big thing which I'll try and talk about. But I think that's what's really helping me find contentment at the moment, is the little things.
That's so cool. Well, it's really encouraging, and I think like seeing from the first time I met you, you know, the girl that was in tears opposite me to, you know, later on that week, I remember you running up to me in the middle of our food tent and you were like, Alice, I'm having so much fun, thank you. And then, you know, seeing you at New Wine Discipleship Year, where you'd chosen to give a year to God because obviously stuff hadn't really gone to plan, but you'd still been like, actually, I'm going to give this year to you, God. And then, you know, seeing you last year at New Wine, where I think you might have fallen somewhere, or maybe that was 2 years ago, so, you know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I face planted at the stage doing the open mic. Yeah, that was so funny. And even like last summer, you know, I just moved up to Newcastle and I'd finished DY early and it hadn't gone to plan. I was supposed to stay in Cheltenham, but I left early. I moved up to Newcastle. I think like I moved up to Newcastle wearing rose tinted glasses, thinking I'm gonna find a new church, I'm gonna new year, new me, like you know. And actually, like, none of that happened. Like, I got to Newcastle, I couldn't find a job anywhere. Alice, I went on Universal Credit, which was soul destroying.
Oh,
like, honestly, soul destroying. And I literally went from being like, I was in Kenya in March, and I was on this incredible mission trip, and with incredible people, and every week I got to hang out with them, and you know, it all wasn't perfect, but now I've got no friends, I don't know anyone. I thought I was going to see my extended family all the time, but then I realized everyone has it had a whale on the wall, and I was just literally, I had a mattress on the floor, and I was like staring at this whale like, I'm so depressed right now. And but actually hindsight is such an amazing thing, and I think, you know, that summer was a time where I was just alone, and I just was meant to be physically alone, like from a lot of people, and God had stripped me away from things that, you know, still semi self-destructive habits, I guess. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like I couldn't go out. I didn't really have friends to go out and hang out with, like drinking and stuff like that, which was still something I was figuring out. And then I just spent a lot of time going to the beach, and I didn't feel like I was spending time with God at the time, but actually looking back, I was spending so much time with God, but it just didn't feel nice, you know? And I think it felt terrible, and I was just so angry with him all the time. I just cried all the time.
Oh,
And
God.
I hadn't really found a solid church yet either, so because the church I originally moved up to was a church plant, so that was really exciting. And then I went to New Wine again in the summer, and I was like, yes, I can just sort of escape my life for 2 weeks. And I'd read this book called Redeeming Love that I honestly was just, my parents had gone away for like 2.5 weeks. So I was home alone, and I just and was like, I just relate to her so much. And then my friend called me, was like, are you coming to New Wine? I was like, yes, I've got no money, but I'm coming. I think I literally went to New Wine with like £50 in my bank account. I was, this is just awful. Like, if anyone knew, again, the shame. And like, I then had like I was there for the 2 weeks this time. So I did the Hungry venue. And it was when like I was there that I was that stubborn, Alice, that I stood in the arena with my best friends, Becca and Saf, and the song This Is Love, the New Wine song, came on. And I was like, I'm not singing it. And honestly, I love worship. Like, I love worship. I was that stubborn and angry at God that I wouldn't sing. And then it got to the chorus, and Becca looked at me and I was going, this is love. And I was just like, and then I just cried the whole time. And then it was from that point that so much happened, and I got a lot of prophetic words about my future, and like where people thought what was God doing with me, and it was a lot about being planted and like roots, and I know it sounds all very like la-di-da and over spiritual, but it was, you know, like God had put me in a place that he had gone, this is where you're going to be now for a while, and you need to kind of root yourself. And that's kind of what this past year in Newcastle has been like. And it's not been easy, and but it's been joyful at times. And that's also where I got called to social work. So I ended up leaving New Wine like, I'm going to apply for uni. And that's a funny story, because I was like, how am I going to tell my parents, who were so anti me going to uni, that I now want to apply for uni? So, and it was for social work as well, which was not really what I'd planned to do. I'd always wanted to do nursing, but I'd failed my maths GCSE again. I'd got my result back that summer, and I didn't get it. So I knew I couldn't apply for nursing. And again, I was gutted, but some part of me was like, I think social work's something I need to just research. And I spent days researching it when I got home. And I chatted to a couple of people. One of the girls at the church plant team, she was a social worker. And I was just like, when I spoke to her, I was like, that sounds so me. Like, I feel like I could really do that. So then I went and sat in this beach cafe where I now work, and wrote my application on UCAS, and was like, right, I don't have any money to apply. So now I was like, God. So basically I was like, if I apply, I don't need to tell my parents, because if I get rejected, it doesn't matter, and we can just sweep it under the carpet. God was like, you need to tell them. I was like, no, it's a lot of hassle, God. Lots of emotions there. I don't need to go there. And then I came downstairs one morning. I was like, Mum, Dad, can I speak to you? And like, you know, I'm 23 at this point, so it's like I'm an adult. Like, I can make my own decisions, but just sort of a lot of stuff had been going on in my life where, you know, I needed their support. Like, I literally didn't even have £25 to my name to apply for UCAS. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I sat down. I was like, so you know, I'm on like universal credit, and you know, I've had a bit of ups and downs the past few years, and not really knowing what I'm doing. But I think, you know, I've been researching social work, and I just really want to apply. And I've not found a job. I can't even get a waitressing job. Like, I need to start sending my life somewhere.
Yeah.
And I gave them this whole speech, and I was like, my dad was trying to interrupt me. I was like, don't, just let me finish, and then you can have your say, because I was like, I know he's gonna have something to say on this, and he did. And you know, but what came out was, I don't think it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
But, and I was like, oh, there's a but this is fine, this is better than I expected. You know, they basically saw that, you know, I needed to start pointing myself in a direction, and I needed to do something for myself to prove it to myself. So yeah, they lent me, and I was like, but I don't have the money to apply, so please can you lend me £25 so I can pay for my UCAS application. So then I sent it off, and I got in, and it was through clearing, so I was at Northumbria. And yeah, that's been amazing. I love my course so much, and I'm so excited to become a social worker. But literally, as I'd applied, I went to the doctors, and I think this is why I'll probably sort of link in a lot of my mental health issues. That summer before I moved, my mum's really close friend had sort of mentioned to her, you know, has Mary been to the doctors about like her depression and stuff? And my friend's mum sort of works in an industry where a lot of people have manic depression, which is what bipolar can be known as, or was known as. And she basically saw that in me. She's known me since I was a baby, so she's seen all the ups and downs and ins and outs. My mum would be the one she'd go for coffee before and moan about me and all the terrible decisions I've made, that kind of mum friend. And I think I chatted to her about it in the summer, and I just cried and was like, I know what you mean, and I see it in myself, but I don't really want to believe it.
Yeah.
And then I went to the doctors for the first time in September and said, look, I think this is something I need to talk about with you, and I think I see this in myself. Can we sort of explore it? And she was like, yes. And we had a really big conversation, and she gave me all these mood diaries and mood charts, and that's how it started at first. And I had to do like a good 3 months of like tracking my mood and figuring that out before and I went for counselling through the uni, because I hit November and I just was so depressed again. And I think, so obviously I've been diagnosed with bipolar. I've not had my official diagnosis because COVID got in the way, which is really annoying. But all directions, I'm at the point where all direction point to one place, you know. And I think it's just going for the official like diagnosis appointment basically. And I think it's been the really, really hardest thing ever, but at the same time it's made so much of my life make sense. Because when I look at, I don't know if you know what bipolar is, but it's a mood disorder and it's a chronic illness. It's not got a lot of biological research, but the research that has been done is says like it's a chemical imbalance in your brain which causes your mood to cycle in ways that are just not sort of normal. I don't like the word normal, but you know, everyone has moods and everyone has emotions and everyone has feelings, and we all get moods where we're sad and depressed, and we all get moods where we're happy. The difference with bipolar is so you have a mood scale, and you can be on any part of this mood scale, and it's sort of like in the middle is sort of semi-stable, where you kind of like you're sort of okay, and then you can go right up to what's called mania, and at the manic side of it, and then severe depression. And a lot of the time you're not really in this stable place where you kind of dip and flow. You're one or the other. You're like really manic or you're really depressed. And I can see it in myself. I'm leaning towards the bipolar 2 diagnosis, which is why I need to go for this appointment to get that properly confirmed, which is more of a rapid cycle. But you're not, so I don't know if you've seen stuff about Kanye West in the news and things.
No, I haven't.
They talk about he's got bipolar, and obviously he's a really high profile person. So he talks about he's not on medication, but he when he goes through a manic phase, it's always in the news because he's being really outspoken. He's being really like, he might not be making decisions that are kind of, people like, does he have any common sense? That kind of reaction. And everyone is different. It's like everyone's experience with their bipolar is different. So for me, mania looks like I don't sleep properly. I'm constantly doing everything. Like, I'm really highly likely to go and drink more and like nights out or clubbing is like, if I'm manic, that's probably like where I'll be like, yeah, let's go for a night out. And it's like all of this energy that you just can't get rid of, and you kind of don't really know why, and it's frustrating, and you get really easily agitated. And obviously the lack of sleep is just, it's really hard to deal with, because I've done like a 6-hour shift on like 3 hours sleep, and I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but I've done that sort of for a week. And then you think about it and you're like, why? And then the depression comes, and it's like there's no trigger. Sometimes you're just coasting along, you might even feel a bit stable for a while, and then you just crash and your mood goes into depression. And it's figuring out your cycles, and it's figuring out what triggers you. So for example, I know that alcohol is something I need to be really careful with, but when you look at the research with bipolar, 90% of people with bipolar have an alcohol problem. I'm not saying I have an alcohol problem, but when you look at those statistics, there's a reason why you struggle with something more. And I think when I started to learn this about myself, I started to have more grace for myself, because I was like, actually, this isn't because I'm a terrible person. This is because I have an illness, and actually I can do things that can help me. And it's really hard, and I'm not perfect, and I do not get it right all the time. There was a point in lockdown where I kind of just threw caution to the wind. I was so manic, and I just went, I don't care anymore. And I remember I met up with some friends, and I got really, really drunk. And my dad had come pick me up, and I was like, I'm 24, I should know better than this. Like, but I just made a stupid decision. And it's not blaming it on, I think where I find my faith intertwines now with my mental health and how I manage it is when we look at sin. I think when we look at sin is anything that separates us from God. And actually, like, sometimes my mental illness separates me from God, but also at the same time, I do have a mind, and I do have decisions and things that I can choose to do to help myself to be a bit more stable with whatever I'm going through. And I think that's the point I'm slowly getting to, is going, okay, God, I can continue to fight you on this and be angry at you that you're not doing anything about this. And it's really hard, and try not to cry, but like, I can continue to get angry at you and upset that I've got this illness, and that I know that you're a God who heals, and I know you're a God who can cure me of this and who can do something about it. But also, I know that you're a God who works everything for good, and I know that living in the in-between of that, we all live in it in one way or another, but living in it in a way that I am very personally is really hard. And I think I came to a point where I was like, I can fight you on this, or I can let you help me with this. And I think that place of surrender where you're going, actually, I am so weak, but you're really strong and you're really big. And actually, sometimes we just need to know that God is really strong and really big. And inviting him into the process, and me going to counselling, and me. So it's simple things. I remember meeting up with my mentor, Mim, and I was saying to her, like, I figured it out, God is that anchor. And I've got, it's Hebrews 6:19, we have that anchor. And I think that's what God is for me in my mental health, and just in life, but specifically in mental health. It's like, if I'm anchored to him, whatever happens, whether I'm manic and running around off the walls, like trying to do everything, if I'm not, there's a sort of controlled aspect to that, if that makes sense. So it's like, if I'm running around but I'm getting 7 hours sleep a night, and I'm talking really fast and I'm really over energized, or I'm getting so much work done and I'm still going to work and committing to my shifts, and you know, like there's a sort of place where it becomes just who I am, but there's also a place where it becomes really toxic. So you know, the going out, the over drinking, the drugs, the, you know, whatever comes with that really dark place of being in this manic phase where you're just constantly seeking the next thrill, because that's kind of what the mania does to you. You want to seek something that's going to make you feel like euphoria, and all of those things do as like alcohol, whatever. If I'm being controlled with that, it's because I'm like, okay, God, I'm really weak, but I know that you can help me. So it's by being disciplined daily. It's going, okay, I need to go to bed at 10:30 and I need to wake up at 8. I need to go for a run, or I need to move my body because that helps me, you know. So if I'm doing like 7 workouts in a week, but I'm, you know, I'm feeling okay, like that's how God helps me. And it's so practical. Like I think obviously there's a spiritualness of it where you know the Holy Spirit is within me, so he gives me this power over those things that lead me into sin. I think you do have to take ownership of your decisions. There are times where I choose not to go to bed at the time that's sensible for my mental health, and I choose to do things that are not going to help me. So I do then have to come back to God and say, God, like I'm really sorry, like I have to repent of that and say, like, I'm not helping you to help me, like I'm not helping myself, you know. So I think when you understand that, I think faith is an incredibly powerful thing, and I couldn't do it without God. As much as I know I try to all the time, and we all do, but I think I couldn't do it without him. And I think it's going to be a constant process of me figuring it out, and I'm never going to be perfect. And I think you have to stop putting expectations on yourself. And once you do that, you just take one day at a time. Because for me, if someone says, "What do you see yourself in 5 years?" I'm like, I don't know. I hate that question. I think it's a nice thing to have dreams and stuff, but for me at the moment, I find that question really hard, because it's like, hun, I don't know where I'm going to be next week. You know, and I think then you can learn to surrender to God daily in just a really simple way, and saying, like, this is how I'm feeling today, or this is my mood. Like, God, I'm really manic still. Can you just help me to not make stupid decisions? He's the common sense that I don't always have. Like that, I always describe it to my best friends like, oh, my common sense button's switched off at the moment. So if you see me doing something that just is like, Meza, what are you doing? Like, come on, like I need you to tell me. So accountability, again, if I'm not talking to my friends and saying to them, you know, I remember a few weeks ago I was like, oh, some of my friends are going to the pub and like I really want to go, and my friend was like, that's a really terrible idea, Mary, like you should just stay at home and chill because you're a bit all over the place at the moment. Not, she wasn't being mean, but she was just helping me see something in myself that I couldn't identify. You know, my mum does it. She's like, you really need to go surfing again this week, Meza. You should just probably stay at home and chill. And then I just cried because I was like, I'm just so tired. But do you know what I mean? Like putting yourself in community and in the right community. But I think there needs to be more openness about it, which is why I'm so grateful to be able to chat here about it, is that I have been hurt by the church in regards to my mental health. And that's really difficult. And you can feel insecure going into church or going up for prayer. And it is really damaging when someone tries to pray for you to heal your bipolar, when actually at the time that's a really not unhelpful thing. You know, and I think prayer is important and it's key, like it's essential. But I think the church is opening up itself more so than ever about mental health. But I still feel a twinge of sadness when you look at seminars at a festival and you think, okay, so where's the person on a platform talking about how they live with schizophrenia and they have faith? You know, where are the people who, you know, because actually, yeah, God does heal depression and God does heal anxiety disorders, but sometimes he doesn't. And I think we need to actually reach a point where It's really hard, and I don't have enough theological knowledge to back any of this up. This is a lot of my external processings and wrestlings even now. But we need to reach a place where a person hasn't been healed of something, but actually God's using it for his glory in their life, in the way that they live with it. And I think that's what I'm becoming more confident in, is that yes, I'm living in this space, but I know God is using it to glorify him in ways that even I don't know. And
Yeah.
that's through me sharing my stuff on social media with my little blog, and coming on here to chat about it with you, and talking to my friends, challenging people when online they say things like, oh, I'm so bipolar with this, that and the other, and I'm like, you can't say things like that, and yeah, there's a long way to go in everything. And again, the world's not perfect, we're not perfect, but God is, and he knows what he's doing, and I think he'll always use things for good. It just takes sometimes a few years and a few wobbles to start to see it. So yeah.
Oh, this has been honestly so full of wisdom and challenges and such good insight, Mary. Thank you so much. And I love what you were saying about the shame basement and actually having to deal with the root and not just keep pushing everything into that shame basement, because otherwise like at New Wine you felt like you were living in shame and you didn't feel like you deserved to be somewhere. But actually dealing with the fact and acknowledging that you have this shame, but actually maybe it's not it's not you that's causing it. You're not on an issue. It's been really cool to hear. And also, we were chatting about contentment and just seeing that actually, because I know COVID's kind of proved again that summer plans, school exams, weddings, none of it's really gone to plan. And actually, just seeing that you're in such a place of contentment, where obviously you might have ups and downs, but obviously you found contentment through that, which has just been so inspiring.
Thank you. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't easy every day, and no one's journey to being content is easy, but I think you do reach a place where you can decide to choose it, and I think that's the biggest thing. I could choose today to just not be content. I think you have to do that, take every thought captive and be like, why am I choosing to be discontent today? What is it? And sometimes you're like, oh, is that it? And then again, it's finding the joy. Joy is separate to your circumstances. We can rejoice in our sufferings, and I think that ties alongside it really well as well. So
Oh, thank you. And again, surrendering to God, with your mental health, if you've got a disability, if something's going on, surrendering this stuff to God. It's been encouraging to hear these. You've been sharing. And I hope for those of you listening have found it helpful as well.
Definitely. And obviously, I think I'll share my Instagram page with you, so if people want to follow that and keep in touch with my ramblings, then that's great. I'd love to do more to help people. I'm more than happy to chat to any person who's struggling, or in any of the things I've talked about. I think it's really important. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, but thank you everyone for listening, and thank you so much, Mary, for joining. But we'll see you for our next podcast. Bye.
Bye.